in our projects, we use competitive calls for proposals. We very much support and promote open collaboration, where we share data, we disseminate results, and promote exploitation of what's delivered in IMI projects. A very important aspect is that the industry that participates to IMI projects, they do not receive any funding. They contribute to our program, and their contributions are in kind. And I will give some more examples shortly. So on the next slide, we have the budget for the current funding round. So for the period from 2014 to 2024, we have altogether nearly 3.3 billion euro, which is split between European Commission, cash from European Commission. So this is 1.6 billion euro, and this funding goes to public beneficiaries, so universities, SMEs, mid-sized companies, patient groups, and so on. So the mid-sized companies, this is a novelty at IMI, and I think Fabrizio will cover a little bit more on the eligibility rules. And then we have the contribution from EFPIA, which is the European Federation of Pharma Industries and Associations. They plan to contribute 1.4 billion euro in in-kind contributions. So this is mostly, in most cases, personnel cost. So experts, researchers working on board of the project side by side with the academics and the researchers from other public organizations. And then we have this smaller box of 213 million that is reserved for other contributors. We call them associated partners. So this is also a novelty at IMI, where we allow contributions from other industries or foundations, any organizations who are interested to contribute to IMI program and IMI objectives. In terms of our strategic research agenda, it is very much developed based on the WHO report. We focus on the high medical need disease areas where either the treatments are lacking or they are not sufficient. So here you have a quite broad list of different disease areas that we cover. If we want to go into a little bit more detail on the next slide, we have a little bit of a breakdown. In terms of higher priority areas, there is 5, among them neurodegeneration, immunoinflammation, metabolic disorders, infection control, and translational safety. Very much we also put emphasis on supporting technologies, which are imaging, ICT, medical devices, and so on. And then on the right side, you have all those different aspects that you can see in many of our projects, which we call enablers. So many of our projects will be focusing on target validation, stratified or personalized medicine, innovative trials, data generation, prevention, patient adherence, and so on. So this gives you an idea of the work program that we are planning to cover. So typical IMI consortium is quite large. On average, you have 25 partners. Average budget is around 20–30 million euro. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Our biggest program is nearly 200 million euro, so they can get quite large. Always we have multiple pharma companies collaborating together, as well as associated partners, which could be foundations or other industries. And then multiple partners from the scientific community. So like I mentioned, academia, hospitals, patients, small and medium enterprises, and so on. So far, our community is quite diverse and quite large. As you can see, here you have breakdown of how it looks like in terms of participation. So we have a lot of various academic teams. We have quite a nice number of small and medium enterprises. Of course, the industry teams, as well as patient organizations, and regulators. We have more than 7,000 researchers working on board of our project, and of course they are collaborating together to bring positive results and contributions into improving R&D and productivity of pharma industry. So now I will give the floor to Fabrizio. He will cover the rules of participation, funding, and IP.
Thank you, Magda. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. So, as you may know, IMI2 is funded and gets resources from the European Commission in the framework of the H2020 framework program, and this is quite different from what was, for those who are familiar with IMI1 and the 7 framework program. At the time, indeed, IMI, like many other initiatives, despite we're getting resources from the 7 framework program, they were self-standing and they were an independent legal framework. At this time, under the H2020, the big simplification that the Commission implemented was that all those programs, despite receiving funding from the H2020, are subject to the same legal framework. And this happened indeed to IMI2 as well. What does it mean? It means that the H2020 rules of participation are fully applicable to the IMI2 and the funded project. However, in order to grant some flexibility, it has been granted some derogation to the general rules of participation. This derogation concerns the eligibility for funding. Magda already gave you a little bit of flavor about this, and then the intellectual property rights. So the idea of the IMI2 is that the system is completely open. We welcome the participation of any organization which could carry out activity which are relevant for the IMI2 objective, in particular for the funded project. This organization can come from any place in the world, but that doesn't mean that all organizations participating to our project are indeed eligible for IMI funding. Why? Because as we just mentioned, only this is a derogation from the general rules. IMI has a limited eligibility for funding, which means that we can only fund organizations which are having a specific legal status. So we normally talk about academic institution, small and medium enterprise, and no-profit organization, like either they are research organization, patient organization, or public body, etc., etc. The big novelties of of IMI2 is that now under IMI2 we can also fund mid-sized companies which are considered independent organizations having an annual turnover up to 500 million euros. And this is a major change for us with respect to IMI1. A point that this type of organization needs to be established either in EU member states or in associated countries, which means that third country organizations are in principle not eligible for funding. However, there is an exception that third country organization could be eligible as far as IMI consider their participation as essential for the specific project. I would like to stress that this is an exception. It's normally subject to the evaluation of the expert of our evaluation panel, and is subject to a restrictive interpretation. So, I mean, if you really consider to involve any third country participant, we suggest you to make the case clearly why their participation would be essential in the action. For the rest, we apply the simplification which have been implemented in the H2020. So we simplified condition for participation. Under this call, the main condition for participation is that each proposal should include at least 3 independent legal entities from 3 different member states or associated countries. Here again, the 3 entities should come from either the European Union or the associated country. Third country doesn't count for the minimum of 3. So what we expect, so now we are making this webinar is about the call 6. So the first deadline you have is for the short proposal, which is expected in January next year. At that time, we expect short proposal combining applicants which are either eligible for funding or not eligible for funding, but we are planning to carry out activity relevant for the IMI objective. And on this respect, here the minimum of 3 organizations from 3 different member states or associated country is applicable. This consortium will then, and then you will see in the slide from Magda later on, that the first rank consortium from this short proposal will then invited to join the industrial consortium associated to each topic of this call to submit at the second deadline for stage 2 a full proposal. But let's have a look more in detail. What are the financial rules? So what we found and who we are funding. So as we said, IMI is a private-private partnership, and so we combine funding from 2 sources. One is coming, as we said, from the European Commission under the H2020, which will come the GU funding, which is allocated to beneficiaries receiving funding, which are those organizations which I just mentioned earlier that are eligible for receiving funding, the academia, the small and medium enterprise, etc., etc. Normally, this organization will participate to a final project where their work is combined with FPR, with the industrial consortium associated to a given topic. And as Magda mentioned, this industrial consortium will contribute either in kind or in cash to the activities to be implemented with the specific project. For what concerns beneficiary receiving funding, here again we are fully aligned with H2020. We now have one single funding rate, which is up to 100% of the eligible cost. And indeed, in this case, for this topic, we talk about 100% reimbursement rate for all direct costs and 25% flat rate for the indirect costs included in a given project. And here again, there is the application of the general principle for H2020, so there is a wider acceptance of the average personal cost. We can accept supplementary payment for no-profit organization for staff working on the project, and there are less requirements for time record for those persons which are working full-time on the project. Then the equipment, the consumable, etc., are acceptable based on the usual accounting practice of the beneficiary. And you can also incur costs for subcontracting when this is justified and in line with the project objectives. On the other side, the FPR company, how they contribute? They know, as Magda already mentioned, they contribute normally in kind. What does it mean? It means that they incur costs in the project implementation for which they don't receive any funding from the IMI. Normally, this cost can be consumable, can be the use of equipment, or can be indeed staff, expert working on the project, which again whose cost is not reimbursed by the IMI, or can also consist of cash contribution that this organization, this industry, can transfer to the beneficiary receiving funding for carrying out specific activities. These industries will report their costs based on their management principle, and they will report to the IMI and accounted as project cost. What is important for you to know is that even if we have one industrial partner, this industrial partner may participate with all affiliates of its group. So not necessarily all the company need to be listed in your grant agreement. They may rely on the contribution for their affiliates, and you have also to know that they may have some activities carried out outside the EU. Because at program level, IMI2 accepted up to 30% of the total in-kind contribution from FPR or associated partner may come from outside the EU member state. So it can happen that in one given project, some activities are taking place outside the EU. Just for your information, we can have a reporting period of 12 or 18 months, but the standard rule for us, and so this is what you should have in mind when you prepare your short proposal and then your full proposal. Normally, IMI establish a reporting periodicity of 12 months. So you should build your proposal on this basis. On a 12 months reporting periodicity, then you have to know that the beneficiary receiving funding will submit after 12 months, then a financial report for the cost incurred together with a technical report, which is about the scientific activities carried out in the project, while the FPA beneficiary will join the technical report of the consortium. So the entire consortium will report technically, so a scientific report, but they won't report together with the consortium for what's concerned the financial costs, which are submitted to IMI outside outside the grant. But let's go to see the second and key derogation that IMI received from H2020, which concern the IP rules. So the idea, the IMI2 IP rules is based on the IMI1, so it's coming from there and has been confirmed and is considered that this policy is the basis of the success of IMI1, and therefore it has been confirmed for IMI2. The main idea of this policy is we want to ensure that a rapid uptake of the technology, of the model that has been developed in IMI projects. So we want to make sure that these are taken up in an industrial or regulatory practice. The basic point, this is a policy that is a de minimis policy, which means that cannot be restricted any further, but it can be improved, which means that the applicant consortium can decide to expand the level of the access right, but you cannot restrict them. And the main concept behind is that we want to anticipate, we want to avoid that during the project implementation any problem occurs. So the idea is to address completely the IP right before the start of the project to get an agreement based on this general principle which are established either in the IMI2 regulation and in the grant agreement. The main concept for, so I will try to give you an idea of the main concept of the IMI IP policy. So first of all, background. What is background? Background is all those information that are owned by the project participant and which are necessary for the project implementation. The background needs to be identified prior to the start of the project and should be identified in the consortium agreement. Beneficiary will have to give access to the other beneficiary for the background identified in the consortium agreement, and the access right is free. And this is why? Because this is necessary for the project implementation. Another key element for the IP rules is the result. Result is any output of the project which fall within the project objective. Here again, to result, the IMI policy foresees specific access right. While we have to differentiate the result from the side ground, which fall absolutely outside the scope of the IMI IP policy. And it's because the side ground is generated during the action, but fall outside the project objective. As you can understand from the distinction between result and side ground, it's very important to avoid future dispute on legal ground, is to clearly identify the project objective. If you identify the project objective clearly, you avoid a problem in differentiating result and side ground. Then it's important as well, in order to avoid any misunderstanding, that participation in IMI project does not affect the ownership, your ownership either of your background or of your result. The rules is that obviously you remain owner of the background you take into a project. You just have to grant access right as far as this is necessary for the project implementation, and as well you will be the owner of the result that you generate. However, as part of your contractual freedom, you can the ownership of your result, of your background, but this is beyond the IMI IP policy. And another key principle is that, which is now reflected as well in the H2020 IP policy, is that we acknowledge the joint ownership of results. It means that when results are generated jointly, or the contribution to the generation of a given result cannot be differentiated, the generator, so the beneficiary who generated this result, apply the joint ownership. And the joint ownership then requires the agreement on a joint ownership agreement, However, we strongly suggest you to address the key principle of joint ownership already in the consortium agreement. This would prevent you from having a problem later on where the joint ownership is indeed, occur. Another important element in the IMI IP policy is the exploitation. And under exploitation, we distinguish between research use and direct exploitation. We talk about research use referring to the use of results or background necessary to use the result for the completion of the project. While we talk about direct exploitation for commercialization or develop for commercialization. So the IMI access right, you will see in a second, only refer to research use. So basically, we want, beside the completion of the project, we want you to agree on access right to the other beneficiary, to third party, only to allow research use, because this is what I refer when I say that we want to ensure that the result of IMI are promptly taken up in the industrial or regulatory practice. But this doesn't mean that you are obliged to give access right for direct exploitation of other entities. So the typical example we make to differentiate research use and direct exploitation is the use of a biomarker. A biomarker used in a clinical trial to validate a compound is considered to be research use, while the use of a biomarker which become part of a diagnostic kit should be considered commercialization. And based on this distinction, you can see in this table how we deal with the different access rights. I mean, what are the access rights attached to the different options we just mentioned. So for the completion of the action, the beneficiary should give and should have access royalty-free to the background necessary to achieve the project and to the result, to any result generated under the project. While for research use, we could talk about fair and reasonable term, both for beneficiary or for third parties. These third parties, however, will only have access rights to background needed for using the result or to result only after the project ends. And as you can see, when we talk about direct exploitation, the access rights have to be negotiated. So the participant who is owning the result or the background is free to negotiate the condition for granting access right to the result of background. Another point which is very important is the access right needs to be given in writing, but however we suggest that the procedure for requesting and granting access rights should be done in the most simple possible way. Most of the IMI projects agreed on a requesting and granting by email. And another element which should be addressed in the consortium agreement prior to the start of the project is time limits for access right to third parties. What does it mean? That, as I said, after the project ends, third party could request access right to the background necessary to use the result or to result itself. And this can happen during a certain period. The duration of this period, so how long after the duration after the end of the project third party can apply for access right, has to be established by the beneficiary when agreeing on the consortium agreement. And this normally should be done considering the expected result, the type of project, and the potential use of this result. Obviously, since the third party are not part of the agreement, of the consortium agreement, by definition because of third party, this time limit the decision upon this time limit should be adopted in the most transparent way and should in a way make it public, so communicated externally. So in this last slide, you see which are the reference documents you can consult if you want more information about the IP rules for IMI2. So there is a reference of the rules for participation, which have been derogated by the IMI2 delegated regulation, as you can see, the IPR section. And then the same provision from the delegated regulation are spelled out in the IMI model grant agreement, which is available on our website. very soon, we also expect to publish the IMI2 annotated grant agreement that mostly reflect the H2020 annotated model grant agreement, but which include very specific provision or very specific annotation for IMI2, and in particular, there is a quite detailed section on the IP policy, which it's definitely very useful for anybody who needs some more insight about the IP rules for IMI2. I think that's me. Then I leave the floor to Magda.
So I will cover the last part of the presentation, the life cycle of IMI, and also some tips for proposal preparation. So to describe the life cycle, I just wanted to tell you about how the topics are defined. So very broadly, IMI, of course, has set its scientific research agenda, which I already briefly described to you. This was done with quite intensive participation of the FPA companies, but with very broad consultation with all the relevant stakeholders. So with the research community, with patients, with regulators, and so on. After this consultation, the research agenda was set, and it guides the program that's being implemented in IMI. Further detail is provided annually in our annual work plan, where we try to define or anticipate any topics or at least research areas that we are intending to cover during the given year. In IMI2, also we have a new advisory body, which is called Strategic Governance Group. There are 5 currently established for the 5 main priority areas of IMI, and those groups comprise of representatives of the pharma companies interested in a given area. So for example, for diabetes and metabolic disorders, all the companies interested to work in this area are represented. They meet regularly and discuss strategy and plan for future topics to be launched in IMI. So this was introduced to streamline a bit the topic preparation process, and also to have a more strategic approach to make sure that the topics, the projects fall together very well, and they have some kind of continuity together. Topics are then described and launched in the form of calls, just like this call 6. Before the topic is launched, it goes through consultation with our member states and also with our scientific committee to make sure that all the scientific aspects are covered, and after modification of the topic text, the call is launched. Of course, then we go through evaluation, we award grants, and the consortia sign grant agreements. So this cartoon shows you more or less how the process looks like. We start with topic definition, which I already described. Then we go into call launch and collect all the short proposals from applicant consortia. So as was already quite a couple of times mentioned, the consortia that are expected are comprising of multiple partners. They need to be relevant to the topic objectives, and you need to make sure that you cover all the topic objectives and bring relevant expertise. So that's why typically IMI consortia are quite large, because the IMI projects are quite complex. Then those proposals are evaluated using independent experts during an evaluation meeting, and typically it's a 2-day meeting. The best consortium is chosen during this process, and only one. There is only maybe a couple of examples where 2 consortia were selected together and they were merged in the end, but that doesn't happen very often. So normally there's one winning consortium that comes out. At second stage, this winning consortium is invited to write the full proposal together with the industry and associated partners, if relevant. And in this full proposal, of course, we expect to see much more detail on implementation of the of the project on all the contributions from the different parties. This full proposal is again evaluated using independent experts. Typically, we try to keep the same experts from stage 1 and stage 2. In the second stage, we much more pay attention to the implementation and look at what potential impact this proposal will have. There is no competition anymore at the second stage, as normally we have one full proposal per topic. If the proposal gets green light from the evaluation panel, it's recommended for funding, and after the approval by our governing board, it is invited to work on the grant preparation and on their consortium agreement. So the criteria of our evaluation are exactly aligned with the Horizon 2020. So there are 3 criteria, and in stage 1 we only look at excellence and impact, and in stage 2 we look at all 3 criteria. In terms of experts, the requirement is to have minimum 3. However, typically we try to have more experts, partially because different types of expertise need to be often represented, or in anticipation of potential conflict of interest, we try to have additional experts in case we lose some due to conflict of interest. Of course, the proposals are evaluated as they are, not as they could be. So you have to make sure that you describe what you're planning to conduct in the potential project as well as possible to provide the experts with sufficient detail. I will not go through all the sub-criteria of each criteria. You can find this information on our website, but this is for your information to see what is being evaluated, what the experts pay attention to, so you make sure that you address all those different aspects sufficiently in your proposal to give them enough evidence to evaluate your proposal indeed. So these were all the sub-criteria for the different criteria. The time to grant that we normally keep is 8 months from the submission of the full proposal to grant agreement signature, 5 months for informing applicants of the scientific evaluation outcome, and then 3 months for signing the grant agreement and the negotiations on the consortium agreement. And to help with keeping the momentum, we validate the legal entities in parallel. The model grant agreement follows also the H2020 grant agreement with some IMI2 specificities, as Fabrizio described. It is signed between IMI and the coordinator only. There is no more managing entity like we used to have in IMI1, and all other beneficiaries sign accession forms to the grant agreement. And this next point also was already described by Fabrizio. FPI and associated partners, they have their financial reporting outside of the grant agreement. And also, you will soon have available the annotated grant agreement on our website. In terms of consortium agreement, this document is for the consortium, and we do not interfere with preparation of this agreement unless some kind of guidance or assistance is needed from us. But this is for all the partners of the consortium to agree on the rights and obligations of all the partners, especially on the governance of the consortium, the liability, and the IP. Of course, the consortium agreement has to comply with IMI model grant agreement, and IMI will not sign a grant agreement with the consortium unless we have sufficient assurance that the consortium agreement is agreed or preferentially signed. So, of course, the consortium agreement has to be adapted to specific needs of each particular project. Now we're going to move to some tips for success based on already 15 calls for proposals that were launched by IMI team. We have seen various cases, and based on this experience we can give you some feedback. So common mistakes that we have seen before. In terms of admissibility and eligibility criteria, sometimes these are not met. So one obvious one is the submission deadline is missed. And unfortunately, this happens all the time, that consortia wait till the last minute to perhaps enter the last details, and something happens and they miss the deadline by sometimes seconds, and it's very unfortunate. So please make sure that you give yourself enough time to submit the proposal. Sometimes proposals are out of scope, and this could be either done by mistake, the proposal is submitted to the wrong topic, or completely somebody is trying to submit something that's not relevant. So if that's the case, the proposal might be deemed uneligible. The text needs to respect the proposal template. So here what we pay attention to is to ensure that each proposal at least has the key sections that are required in the template. And of course, a minimum of 3 legal entities need to be there from the EU and associated countries. Another mistake, but this is more not for the admissibility or eligibility, this is more for the criteria of evaluation. If the proposal does not address all of the objectives listed in the call, this is of course a disadvantage. What you need to make sure is that you read the topic text in detail and that you address each of the listed objectives. And this needs to be of course supported by the expertise of your partners. So not only you need to state how you're going to address each of the objectives, but you need to ensure that the relevant expertise is present among the partners of the consortium. Impact is very important. As in IMI, we are trying to achieve something concrete in the end, so this needs to be also well described in your proposal. It needs to be scientifically excellent, but also it needs to bring some kind of tangible impact in the end. Ethical issues are also important, especially for full proposal, and they need to be fully addressed as the full proposal goes through ethical screen or ethical review. In terms of tips, of course, an obvious tip, read all the call relevant material that's provided, understand the rules and respect them. If you do not understand, if you have any questions, please ask. You can email us, you can call us, and someone will always be available to answer your questions. As I mentioned already, you need to make sure to provide the reviewers with all their information requested to let them evaluate your proposal. Start working early. We publish pre-materials, or at least the titles of potential topics, very early. You see drafts of our topics already on the website well before we launch the call, so there is enough opportunity to start working and start networking early. And of course, finalize and submit your proposal on time. This screenshot shows you how and where you access the portal. You can access it from the participant portal of the European Commission or directly from our website, and you can go to the SOFIA Submission of Information Application portal. If you are looking for partners, if you are someone who wants to coordinate a consortium or someone who wants to join a consortium, you can advertise your interest on IMI's partner search tool. You can register there and specify your areas of expertise or what you are willing to contribute. But also there are other tools that you can find, for example, Fit for Health, or another partner search tool organized by a German national contact point. But of course, this should not be limited to online tools. You should network with any people that you know already. If you're looking for specific expertise, you can ask for recommendations from any of your colleagues. If you are looking for expertise in a given area, you can try to look for scientists who are very strong in the area, looking at their publications and so on. So make sure that you reach out to the relevant people and try to do it early. That gives you better chances for success. More information you can find, of course, on our website. You can subscribe to our newsletter. We are also on social media. And, of course, if you have any questions, please email us at the info desk, and your email will be directed to the appropriate person, depending if your questions are scientific, related to a specific topic, or if they are about IP or procedures. So the relevant person will reply to you in a timely manner. Your contact points are listed here once again. Of course, within IMI, you have info desk and IP help desk, but also you can reach out to your local contact points, such as state representative group and national contact points. Those people are also very knowledgeable about IMI, and sometimes they might be helpful with your networking efforts as well. So that's it from us. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, I think we will be able to take them right now.
Thank you, Magda, and thank you, Fabrizio. So as my colleague said, this is time now for questions and answers. Remember, you can ask questions in writing or on the phone directly talking to us. So if you want to send in a question in writing, we'll read it out loud for you and answer for you. You have to use the question box by tapping the text and just clicking send. If instead you prefer to talk to us, you can book your question via the yellow hand button, and we will unmute you and speak to you directly. We already have a question we received over the presentation, and it's a question by Leah Witten. Leah is asking, are the industry partners already known at the show proposal stage, even though they're not part of the proposal at that stage? And then again, what is the rate of failure of projects in the second stage?
Okay, so I will take this question. So the industry partners, the companies are definitely listed in the topic text. So in each of the texts, you have a section which talks about FPIA contribution, and there all the companies contributing are listed and their total in-kind contribution. You will also have already indication which company is going to be leading the consortium, leading the pharma consortium, so the main pharma contributor. The particular persons are of course not known at this stage, but at least you know what the companies are. Of course, I would like to just stress that you do not need to worry about the pharma partners for the short proposal preparation. In fact, they are instructed not to discuss anything related to the topic with any potential applicants to avoid any conflict of interest or impression of favoritism. So if you have any questions, even if they are scientific questions on the topic itself, please contact us, and the scientific officer assigned to the topic will answer you if you have any doubts on what to include, what is expected, and so on. And of course, it's very useful to attend webinars on the particular topic because more information can be provided there. In terms of failure rate at the second stage, I don't have a number, but I can tell you that among our, how many calls? 14 calls that we have conducted, there was only, I think, 2 proposals, full proposals, which did not go through. So most of the time, the full proposals are well prepared and mature enough that the experts feel comfortable to recommend them for funding. But it does happen that the full proposal can fail.
Thank you, Magda, for this. Bruno is asking if we can disseminate the slides. Yes, Bruno, as we mentioned at the start of the webinar, the slides will be online shortly after the end of the webinar on the IMI webpage dedicated to this webinar series. We will always also try to publish almost the full length of the webinar recording. So in case you want to refer any of your contacts or colleagues to listen again to the webinar, you can also do that. Now we have another question from Sarah Gonzalez, who would like to check if large companies can participate as third parties in a consortium.
So large companies, by definition, I mean, if we consider large company as larger than having an annual turnover higher than 500 million euro per year, they are not eligible for funding either as a participant or as a third party. So they cannot receive IMI funding, but they definitely can participate at their own cost. So the issue is that if we cannot fund some organization as part of the consortium, we cannot circumvent this rule by making them as a third parties.
Thank you, Fabrizio. We also have a question from Sandra Pla, who I'm afraid has left in the meantime, has left the webinar. Anyway, the question read, do FPA companies have the obligations to complete all the financial reports, forms, audits, etc.?
So for IMI2, as I said in my presentation, FPA will report outside the grant agreement. So they do report to IMI. They have to report the cost they incur in each specific action they are part of, but they won't submit a Form C, as is the Form C for beneficiary receiving funding under an IMI2 model grant agreement. And their costs will be also subject to a certification from an independent auditor. And here again, this is done outside the grant agreement, and therefore is not part of the submission of report by the entire consortium.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Now a question by Camilla Novak, who would like to know, based on our experience to date, what are the chances for a small size contract research organization to become part of a consortium? And she also has another follow-up question saying, are there observed differences in success based on the country in a consortium member, the country the member is located in?
So, Camila, to answer your first question, well, your chances are as good as your efforts to network. Either your organization is known among the scientific community for the services you can provide. So, if that's the case, you might be contacted by someone who is preparing a consortium and needs this specific expertise. They might invite you to join the consortium. Otherwise, it is strongly advised that you network and you try to offer your services. So you would be good to reach out to those people who are most likely applying, and you can find that out by just looking for scientists in Europe who are strong in a given area, either Alzheimer's disease or whichever research area we are covering. Another tip that I can give, you can always have a look at people who already participate to IMI projects or FP7 projects, because of course if they already are participating in our programs, they are very familiar with IMI. There is a chance that they might apply again if there is a topic within their area of expertise. So it will definitely take some digging around and contacting people, but the more you try, the better your chances are, of course. And then on your second question, there is really no difference or no such criteria as where the consortium member is located. As the consortium is assessed as a whole, it's mostly the focus of the evaluation is what the proposal covers, what's their strengths, how excellent is the proposal, the science, and how it's going to be implemented. So as long as the expertise and the capabilities of given partners are aligned with the objectives of the proposal, it doesn't matter which country this particular member comes from. Sometimes it is relevant for certain types of studies, certain types of clinical trials, where specifically it is stated in the topic text that it would be desirable that certain parts of Europe or a good representation of different parts of Europe is included. So then, of course, the coordinator will try to cover participation from all different parts of Europe.
Thank you, Magda. And just to finish off, Camila also has another question. She's asking how exactly the funding works in terms of timelines. Do the consortium members fund themselves and get reimbursed?
Yes, that's exactly the case. So the funding starts as of the project start. So it is important to know that the preparation of the proposal, that period, either for short proposal or full proposal, there is no reimbursement of your cost. Once the project starts, the costs related to the project implementation become eligible. You report to IMI your costs, and then you are reimbursed. However, of course, you don't have to start working with not having any money. So what happens is, as soon as the grant agreement is signed, the IMI office releases what we call pre-financing, and this is just a calculated amount that should get the consortium started. So this should cover quite well the first year of activities. And then every year after submitting periodic report, once this periodic report is approved, you receive the next portion of the funding based on what's claimed, what cost is claimed in the periodic report.
Thank you, Magda, for the specifications. Sarah Gonzalez seems to have had an audio issue before and she couldn't hear the answer to a question. So maybe Fabrizio, would you mind repeating the answer that we provided?
So the question, if I go correctly, Sarah was asking if large companies can participate as third parties. And I was saying that if large companies intended an organization having an annual turnover higher or above 500 million euros per year, the answer is no, because we cannot circumvent a rule for not having large companies as beneficiary receiving funding and then funding them as third parties. They can in any case participate, but they need to support their own costs.
Thank you, Fabrizio. A question by Clara Caminal, who's asking, what happens when there is a failed proposal in stage 2, if there is a new launch of a call, for example?
So there are two situations that could happen. One, if when the two parts of the full consortium meet for the first time, so the winning applicant consortium with the pharmaceutical industry partners, and for some reason the negotiations, the discussions of the full proposal do not work out very early in the process, they can inform IMI, and IMI can decide to move to the second ranked proposal. But this happens only if we are notified very early in the process, right after the invitation for full proposal preparation. In the case where full proposal is submitted and it's evaluated and fails, then there is no project, of course, and it is up to the companies who originally proposed the topic to decide whether they would like to submit it again at the later stage or not. So this is not really in the control of the IMI office. This sometimes depends on the priorities of the pharma companies, and because sometimes timing is very crucial. So having a topic postponed by a year or a couple of years might make it not valuable or viable anymore. So there is no guarantee.
Thank you, Magda. So now we have what seems to be the last question by Irene Ferrario. So in the meantime, if any of the other participants may want to ask something, please do so now. It's the best moment before we close the webinar. Irene asks, could you give us a few examples of who could be classified as associated partners?
So there are already several examples. Some of them are foundations. For example, in call 1 of IMI2, we have Juvenile Diabetes Foundation. We have Helmsley Trust. Then in call 3, I believe we had Gates Foundation joining an IMI topic. But also there are other industries. For example, you could think of diagnostics companies, IT or ICT companies. We have some conversations with GE, with Google, and other this type of companies. Those can join IMI topic either as associated partners, or they can join partner with the FPIA group by becoming their partners in research. So it depends how they would like to join. If more information, if you are interested in receiving more information, it would be useful to email us and gather more information on that topic.
Thanks, Magda. Leah has another question. She would like us to explain the idea of receipts for cash contributions from industry, and she would like to know why is this money handled differently.
Okay, so cash contribution. So I don't know if you are familiar with the definition of receipt at the H2020 level. Receipt in that case is a financial contribution from third party, meaning they are not part of the consortium. However, the IMI model grant agreement foresee that there can be the case that the financial contribution is not coming only from a third party, but is also coming from a beneficiary not receiving funding, namely the FPIA company or an associated partner. In this case, this contribution takes place within the consortium, and the recipient of this cash should inform the IMI, should report this, that received this fund, and this need to be used from project activities. And in order for us to be able to monitor, because this should be also accounted as contribution from the industry to the specific project, we require that this is identified on one side from the FPIA company, which is providing this financial contribution, and on the other side, on the recipient side, that the recipient of the contribution should highlight this receipt together with any other receipt received from third parties. And this is important because in our grant agreement, like in H2020, the rules for no profit apply. So therefore, we have to make sure that all costs which have been claimed to us to be reimbursed with IMI funds are not at the same time covered by financial contribution from the industry.
Thanks, Fabrizio. A last question by Clara. She would like to know how often new topics are launched.
So this year we have launched 3 calls already, and we are planning to launch at least 1 more call, possibly 2, this to be confirmed, but the more certain call is the one to be launched in December. And then for the year 2016, we plan to launch 3 calls. So normally there will be a call between February and March, then 1 in June, and then 1 in the late fall. So that's the plan, at least for 2016.
Thank you. Follow-up questions from Leah. She would like to know if the anticipated receipt amounts need to be included in the budget during the proposal stage, or if this can be a decision that is made later.
So there is not a specific rule in the sense that can happen that this cash contribution, this financial contribution is already identified in the making of the proposal. I would say the full proposal, because it's when the joint consortium start developing a full proposal. So the two sides of the industrial consortium and the public consortium sit together, identify which activity, for instance, could be implemented by an academia, let's say, but supported financially by an industry. So at that point can be identified, but can also happen later on during the project implementation. The important point that is absolutely necessary is that the activity which are supported through financial contribution from an FPIA company or an associated partner should be identified as activities of the project. So they should appear in the description of the action. Obviously, if they are not there and this activity become necessary later on, so after the submission of the proposal, this can be identified and and by amending the description of the action later on once the project has already started.
Thanks, Fabrizio. I see that there is one hand raised by Luis Iranzo. Just let me check if this is not a mistake, and maybe Luis has a question for us. Luis, I have unmuted you, so in case you want to ask us a question, you can just go ahead and tell us what your query is.
Okay. Good afternoon. My question is regarding big data topics published in Call 6. How are you planning the contribution from technical big data questions to projects if the consortium is conformed mainly by EFPIA members, also by academia, or by other who are organizations related to the subject. Are you thinking that big data are going to be supported by academia, technical academia members or contributors?
Luis, can I just ask you a question? Which of the two big data for better outcomes topic are you referring to? Because there are two topics under this program in Call 6.
It was just a general question because as I see that consortium are composed by pharma partners of the association, also by organizations as others, and also by academia, I think that big data should be supplied by academia because organizations, maybe I understand that they don't have technical qualifications, and I don't know if pharma industry companies would apport this qualification, or if you are thinking in academia supplying.
So, since I am not familiar with those big data topics because I don't take care of them, I will just answer you in the following way. First of all, the expectations on providing data, if there is an expectation to provide data by the applicants, it is probably described in the topic text.
Okay.
But nevertheless, I think the data could come both from the applicants, so from academics, as you are describing, but also from the pharma companies. And I think depending on what the applicants propose, when the full consortium meets, that's when all those different contributions and kind of putting together the ideas of both sides and the contributions from both sides will happen. So then the winning consortium will see what the pharma can contribute, what are the contribution of public participants, and how does it all fit together. But I'm quite sure that there will be contributions from both sides. But if you would like to get more precise answer, I invite you to write to us, and then we can put you in touch with the persons who take care of those two topics, and they will be able to answer you in much more detail.
Thank you very much for your help.
No problem, Luis. Also, tomorrow we actually run one of the two topics on the Big Data for Better Outcomes program. And so tomorrow at 2:30 Brussels time, we'll have the one on outcomes-focused platform to empower policymakers and clinicians to optimize care for patients with hematologic malignancies. Sorry, it's a bit long. But if you want to, have a direct interaction with the topic writers and with the science officer that is in charge of this topic, it's actually a very good idea probably to sign up for the webinar. and you can still register up until tomorrow morning, I think, via the IMI website. So it's the same page that we will send you the link to later on, where we publish all the presentations and you find all the registration links. If instead you may have been interested in the first topic under Big Data for Better Outcome program that already took place, that was on the AD spectrum, it's shortened by roads, that already took place this week, sorry, on Tuesday, but we have both the presentation and the video recording of this webinar online. So again, maybe it could be interesting, you know, to watch the presentation of the topic leads and to see if there's anything in there that can answer your question. Alternatively, in any case, we're always very happy to get back to you if you send an email to infodesk@imi.europa.eu.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis. So with this question, I believe we have come to the end of our webinar. I would like to thank Magda and Fabrizio for the presentation and for taking the time to be here with us today. Thank you to all the participants. We hope that we will hear from you soon. In case you have any query, as I already mentioned to Luis before, please just send an email to infodesk@imi.europa.eu, and we will make sure that we forward your question to the person that is most relevant to get back to you according to the nature of your question. And we hope that you find this webinar useful, and we wish you all the best for hopefully successful applications. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.